Welcome to Dice and Mind, a podcast hosted by Brad Brown and Jason Kaufman to explore the intersection of life, games, science, music, philosophy, and creativity through interviews with leading creatives. All are welcome in this space.
There are a couple of our guests where, especially when we have them on, there's this blurred line between having a convo and having a guest in terms of when do we actually hit record and when do we stop recording?
Yeah.
And are they a guest or are they really just sitting around the coffee table with us?
Yeah.
All of them are like that, but it's one of those things that really started with our friend Jim Johnson, where we get him on, and then we kind of forget we're recording.
Or we forget to record.
Or we forget we're recording. Yep.
Yeah, and we get into it.
And it's kind of started that way too with his
this one
podcast partner. And
I know who might that be.
From Continuing Conversations, Michael Dismuke, who's joining us tonight.
Yep, excellent. To that point, Brad, I think of that short list of guests where the boundaries really do blur for us. Either because we've had them on more than once or more than thrice, or because we just click reciprocally. There are a very, very few who over these past few years have really become friends of the pod. And I left our chat with Michael realizing, Michael, you are definitely a friend of the podcast. You're a friend of ours now, and we really appreciate that relationship, and we appreciate everything you do, both for us and for Star Trek, and just the time spent together. It's so worthwhile. Next time I'm in California, or I believe as you are legally obligated to call it California. Next time in California,
I think that law has
I don't know, it might still be there.
deprecated.
Yeah, maybe. But next time we will definitely get together. We will make that happen. But it's just been such a pleasure to have you back to chat, period. But to have you chat about the podcast. Now, Brad, why, however, did Michael come back? He did something really cool just as this drops about a month ago.
Yeah. I will let me say this before I sort of answer your question, because I don't want to give too much away. But we are recording this, because I always break the fourth wall, this intro outro a few days after having the interview. And I was a bit tired, and there were a couple situations during, and especially after we stopped record, where Michael blew my mind, where I was just kind of some ideas around gaming and some other things where I just all I could really do was drop an expletive or two. In some of the few of those moments where I was like, why didn't I think of that? So we'll have to talk about those at a later date when we have him back on. But yeah, I mean, the one thing that I thought that you never know where we're going to go, but where we got into talking about sustainable gardening and things like that. Never would have thought that going into it, but honestly, I think I sent a message through X amongst us.
Yeah, you did. I saw that.
There's a subject we'll leave for the interview that you'll hear. I got my daughter and I talking about this, and planning, because
in fact, I was shopping for one last night.
Were you?
Because it was the arrival, the delivery was the next day, but for Mother's Day, more or less, I got my wife an 8x4 corrugated metal raised bed so that we can get back into urban farming. I took the side garden out completely, and we're going to reestablish it. I put it up in I put it together, which is really easy this morning. Later today, I ordered 45 bags of topsoil to be delivered tomorrow. That's 1,800 pounds. Well, because it's 32 cubic feet of box. And so I was shopping last night, like, how much? I know we're being really cryptic, everybody, but you'll hear it has to do with watering in a garden. And the actual implements, they're pretty pricey, especially since I'd need two of the large ones. But I'm playing with the notion of putting something like that in the new garden.
See, I think that let's stop there because
Yeah,
the context of this will make more sense. But
the audience
Michael
is
is
like,
back,
what are they talking about? Where's my
and
RPG?
just when you think you've heard everything you could possibly talk about on Dice and Mind, you're going
Yeah.
to hear this conversation.
Yes.
But Michael's been on a bit of a writing kick,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's really the true onus
That's
by
why
which we've
we had him back. That's right.
had him back.
Yep.
And we are grateful that he has joined us.
Always.
And so we're going to talk about, of course, Trek. We're going to
Hmm.
talk about the latest writing. We're going to even talk about a term that I'm not a fan of, but truly the sausage making. How did he put together
Yeah.
the latest story that he's
Okay,
published?
so then to
Yeah.
demystify where we're going,
Yeah.
Michael
I'm,
Dismuke in volume 11 of Star Trek Explorer had a short story published that he wrote about Seven of Nine and Captain Shaw on the USS Stargazer. So much like any character you ever play, Brad, in any game,
oh boy, here we go.
Michael now has written some soft canon. See what I did there? Not a glass cannon, a soft cannon. Take all the time you need as we go over to the bio.
Yeah, please. Yeah, you go right ahead. I'm gonna sit on this
Yeah,
one for a while.
Brad just froze and it wasn't his Zoom link.
And it wasn't, yeah, it wasn't that. Yeah, oh
He's like,
boy.
I don't know what that means. Okay,
Yeah.
so but it's very, very exciting news. If you haven't grabbed your copy of Star Trek Explorer Volume 11, you should do so. There are a number of fine short stories in there, but Michael is now in the pantheon of soft canon. That's what I'm calling it, soft canon Trek writers. Because that's an official publication, people. So, like Brad said, you're going to hear us talk about that and a lot more. Michael Dismuke is a certified professional in talent development and certified leadership development and succession strategist. He is a national speaker, trainer, and consultant, a freelance writer for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, and a published comic creator.
So we've done all the introductions. We have not yet learned from a conversation we had with Michael a while back where we should just hit record before we start talking. So we'll just
We are
head
very
right
slow
into the
learners.
conversation we
Yeah.
had before. Where Jason, what did you just say before we hit record about continuing conversations?
Never heard of it. I
You're like everyone.
hardly, hardly. I was just saying that the past several episodes I've really enjoyed. They've been fascinating. You guys are really breaking out of the mold and doing some stuff that's really different, and it's really impressive. I've really been hooked on those recent episodes.
Okay, well, I got to tell you why, because this will be good. So, for all of this, you always do an introduction. So, I don't have to say, I know you always have the introduction and it goes directly into the interview.
Right.
But
That's
what
okay.
inspired Jim and I, who do continuing conversations, for those of you who don't know, Star Trek Adventures, Captain's Log podcast, the game made by Modifius. We do a weekly podcast, 120 episodes ago for like 2 years. But what changed the game for us a lot was listening to your podcasts, Jason and Brad, because you tackle subjects that are beyond mechanics and
Mhm.
story and about the humanity that's brought into the gaming world. And listening to you and being on your show, both me and Jim have talked about it. Like, wow, this is like you have a really good podcast. That even
Thank
if
you
you're
very,
not
very
even into
much.
gaming, you could
Yeah.
listen to it and be like, I should be into gaming. It's a great art form, and I should try it. So we are trying.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to say we are trying to emulate. We look up to both of you because we think you run a really good podcast.
Well, thank you. Right back at you, both of you.
Yeah, that's very
That's
kind of
high
you. And
praise. Yeah.
and we do the same back to you all just because of the
Yeah.
content and the professionalism and all that. And let's be honest, I mean, we follow a lot of games, but I will bring it up to Jason regularly that I'm the one that found the game first. I'm the
Totally
one who found
true.
the game first for many years before I convinced him to actually buy a book.
Also true.
Um, but
By Liege.
I've been a big
Yeah.
fan of the game for a number of years.
Well, I
And
think since you had me on and Jim on and Al Spader too, I think that he's also been on your show a couple times. Like some of the we've broadened our mind, and we've talked about autism, and we've talked about neurodivergency in the gaming space. We've brought on talking about mental health issues.
Loved it.
We've actually had therapists come on the show and talk about it a lot, because of your both talking a lot about the storytelling piece and RPG as literature. We've expanded a lot about topics about how to make your gaming more narrative. So a lot of these topics, you seeded it, so we appreciate you.
Well, we right back at you. We appreciate you, and I think this is what you're going to say, Brad. Right? It was actually Jim who lit our fire. Is that where you were going to go?
Sort of, yes. But I was going to say, having both of you who could run rings, I won't say to Jason, but for me personally, could run rings around me from a storytelling perspective.
Well, that's not me.
Talk about those things. I find I don't want to make it sound like we're all trying to be, scratch each other's backs, but I find it.
I know that's so rude nowadays. We should be like Congress and just stab each other.
Stab each other in the back.
Why compliment each other? It's such a bad habit.
Well, when we were just on recently with
anti-Star Trek.
With a recent guest, we were talking, and we were saying, what do you want to talk about, or what do you not want to? And we're like, well, we want to avoid any controversial. We don't talk about really controversial stuff. We try to. There's so much of that on TV. We try to keep it positive. Right. And I think one of the things, like I was just saying, is listening to both you talk about RPG is lit and storytelling and all that. For someone who traditionally has not been a storyteller, I find it inspiring, and it gets my creative juices flowing, just because I'm hearing about it from a perspective of someone who's trying to step in. And that really even started when we had Jim on early, talking about the process of writing. And then you coming on, and we were talking about the process of writing. And then a story that still sticks with me. And then we're going to really get to what we wanted to have you on.
Speaking of writing.
You write out when you have your nieces and nephews and all that, and you write out the story of the game afterwards, and they read it.
Oh my God.
We still talk about that, because I think that is just a phenomenal way of writing fanfic.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, one was, we talked about, I'm not going to go into depth, but just the exercise of doing it, and then later on, decades later, being able to pull from those ideas. The thing we're still talking about maybe a decade later, I'm like, that must be a good idea. So I'm actually going to put into a published story that I'm writing. And the power of it's an improv class RPG, and then you could take it into real world paying gigs if you wanted to. So I'm a big write it down. If you do it, write it down.
So speaking of writing it down, here's our subtle transition. So the reason you're back, and hopefully you'll be back lots of times, but the reason you're back this time on the podcast is you recently had fiction come out in Star Trek Explorer. I think it's number 11, right? And I mean, I'm just gonna stop there and turn it over to you. Like, congrats. That's so exciting, so huge. And you also mentioned right before we clicked record, delayed record, that what you wrote was a little controversial. So we want to hear about all of it.
Yeah. So let's see where to start. So I will have to give my thank yous again to Modiphius for giving my first chance in paid freelance writing for anything Star Trek IP. And as of this recording, I'm on my 17th publication with them.
Wow.
And what's amazing about the Star Trek universe of writers, and you know this too, Jason and Brad, I think because of the type of writing you've done with your book about, Star Trek and leadership, that it's a small world, really. Star Trek is not, you're one arm's length away from the writers of the show. The minute you start getting into the writing and publishing of Star Trek, the accessibility to certain people like novelists and Heather Antos, who's the IDW publisher, the editor of publishers, she's come on our show. Jackson Lansing.
That was a good discussion.
Jackson Lansing, Colin Kelly, who are the lead writers on the Star Trek comic. Dayton Ward, who is probably the biggest novelist, by name. Derek Tyler Attico. Like once you start writing, you start getting all these creative juices, and then you find out people who are saying, hey, you know what? You're established. You can write. You understand the genre. Pitch this, pitch that. And so I was able to pitch Star Trek Explorer magazine, and as usual, I was surprised that they accepted the pitch. What was controversial about it?
Wait. You have to explan what it's about, though.
Right, I'm gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's getting there.
Sorry. Yeah, it has to do with the character. Right. So I have this thing where I am not a fan of Vulcans, and I'm not a fan of the Prime Directive. And
Interesting.
I pushed into that majorly in a lot of my writing and my gaming, um, for a lot of reasons. So when I go to write something, I don't just want to write a forgettable story. I want to write some controversy in. And one of my biggest agreements with Star Trek Picard season 3 was Shaw. I've always kind of been with Shaw on, you guys think you can do no wrong, you break the rules and you get away clean every time. But I've always thought about that 99% of captains who are just doing their job and they can't get away with that crap. Like, we all know we work with these people. It's like, how did that person stick around here for 20 years breaking HR violations? Who are these jerks who get away with this crap? But I want to write for the 99% of people where we're not that, right? And so I think the controversial part was, and people who've written in about reading the story in Star Trek Explorer number 11 called Confirmation Bias, they started reading it thinking, oh, this is comedy and it's going to make Seven look good. But it flips. I'm not going to tell people how, because they should pick up the magazine.
They should go buy it right now.
And Shaw, though he is a jerk, some people might define him as a jerk, I wanted people to understand his viewpoint.
Interesting.
Because I'm not into the Prime, that's a whole other thing, but I needed them to do that. And so putting Seven in a light where she walks out of the room almost losing is hard for people, because so many shows are written that these people can't do wrong. Michael Burnham, and so that was the point where people, when they talk about it, they say, the ones who email me about reading it, they say, wow, you flipped it and did not go where I thought you were going to go with this. And my thing is, I want Shaw brought back. I don't know how, but Shaw needs to come back, because I think he creates a great argument.
Well, I mean, Commander Shax has demonstrated that you're never really dead in Star Trek.
Yes, that's right.
Well, Todd Stashwick as an actor in that role was just, and I love the way you just set that up, because you're right. I mean, let's be honest, the Grand Captains, if you're not really a Grand Captain unless you've broken the rules,
right? Which is unfair to the people who are doing the job. There's people out there who are following the Prime Directive. Again, I'm not a proponent of the Prime Directive, but it is your job, so you got to do it. So there's people out there following the Prime Directive. They're not taking unnecessary risks. They're bringing everyone home. They are the recipients of the repercussions of Picard's action of becoming a Borg, getting wiped out at 359. Like, there's all these people who have these repercussions, but why are they not celebrated? Of course, we know why, because it's a TV show.
Right.
But I wanted to show that there's people like that in Starfleet who aren't too happy with the Kirks, Picards, and Janeways of the world.
Yeah, and it's you must look through it from a lens similar to me, because when I watched Picard, I could see, sitting in Shaw's shoes, having these people come on the ship and saying, okay, these people are strutting around. They broke all these rules. They're the superheroes. Here I am, I'm trying to get the Titan out there. I've worked my way up from the engineering crawl spaces,
that, right?
Yeah, from the crawl spaces to become a captain. Now all of a sudden they're going to break the rules on my damn ship. There's nothing I'm going to be able to do about it.
Right.
And again, I don't want to give anything away from the story, because you got to read it. But I'm so glad you came. There's like a whole, I'm just going to leave this kind of hanging out there. There's a whole story about leadership that plays out with this.
Well, it's like, imagine you're working. I think both of you. Jason works at the university. I forgot Brad.
I come from you and I come from kind of a business world type of
right. Thing. And sometimes they'll hire this. You'll hear about this person for years at this other company, and then all of a sudden the person comes in and they carry this air about them, like, I was hired because of this and blah blah blah. It's like, okay, but that doesn't invalidate all of our work,
right?
It doesn't invalidate that I got through my job because I'm brilliant. Maybe I'm a little quieter than you, but I'm still brilliant in my own way, right? And imagine having Picard and Riker come on your ship where you've kept these people alive for 5 years, and you're running a clean ship, no problems. You're doing your job. You're looking forward to retirement. You get to drink your Pinot Noir at night because you're really doing your job. And then all of a sudden you have these three egos, Seven, Picard, and Riker, come on your ship and start calling shots as if, what? Why did you earn this? You're not even a real admiral. And Yeah, it's like you're riding your laurels and coming and putting my people at risk.
And here
Why
comes
do
the
we have?
explicit comment. You die helping those bastards too.
Yeah, right. How awesome do you? When will Michael ever be able to walk into a room and say, "Because I've been 20 years at Eden Housing, the company I work at, I'm going to now call the shots with no explanation."
Yeah.
That's an argument that needs to be made, right?
Yeah.
Jason looks like we peed in Picard's cereal right now.
I am of two minds right now, but I'm with you. I mean, and of course, I mean, you have to agree. Um, you absolutely have to agree. I mean, I do think with actually two thoughts. One, I think Seven. I mean, I love the character, right? One of the best characters in all of Trek. And I hesitate. Anti-hero is probably too much, but like they do make her an exceptionally flawed character.
Dark hero.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a good one. Yeah,
yeah,
but I
and
mean,
keep in mind they had to twist the script to write her in though, because I don't know if you had a chance to read David Mack's Firewall yet.
no,
Ooh.
no.
Okay, David Mack, shout out to you. Make sure to tag him on this show. I wrote an essay about Seven, probably in 2018 or 2019, about why she would never make it in Starfleet.
Right.
He nailed it as if he
Really
was on the exact same line. And I talked to him about it. I was like, dude, thank you. I almost cried because I was so afraid when your novel came out, it would take her pro Starfleet. It did not. Fenris Ranger, right?
Yeah.
So I understand for the show, they had to insert her in, but it's awkward as we see on the show. It's totally awkward and it's unnatural to her character.
Right.
But they're doing it because of ratings, because people love Jerry Ryan. So I understand that. But the fact that we see this, I think that needed to be shouted out a little bit more. My story wanted to shout that out.
Excellent. The other thought I have, I was thinking about this earlier today, kind of just as I was pondering, like talking with you. A colleague of mine at the university posted a meme, just like, just text, not long ago, and they were, it was whatever, but it stopped me because it resonated, and I'm not doing it justice, but to paraphrase, it was something like what they posted was, I'm a good person. I don't have to be nice all of the time. And that just kind of stopped me dead in my scrolling tracks. And I thought, you just summed up like the last decade of my life. And then thinking of Shaw, it's like that's exactly what we're talking about. Like this is a deeply honorable character. And sometimes that's enough.
I learned a word in therapy. I sometimes get some therapy, and dialectic. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Says the
think
therapist.
So much.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's where you nailed it. Is it possible for someone not to like the stars of Starfleet?
Yeah.
And is it also dialectically possible for them to be an awesome captain?
Yes.
Yes.
And it makes the best people, not just the best characters.
Right. And so I love dialectic characters like that. That they have these extremes. What happens in life, where I apply this, in my life is it's possible to be dialectic, and many times society makes you fight one or the other as opposed to finding the happiness in the middle. Like I can accept both of those. I'll have to sacrifice one of each egos at some point at personality, but I need to find the me in the middle, right? And I think Shaw's he knows who he is,
right?
And he's not he's unapologetic. Like, I'm not playing the risks you are, and I'm still a great captain, and you're going to follow my orders. I just love that kind of character.
Okay, so I hesitate to say this because I'm with you, Brad, 100% when it comes to our favorite canons in general. Please, for the love of God, stop making prequels. That said, I have to say I would love to see Shaw back, and I would love to see, in whatever it is, cough cough, Star Trek Legacy, I would love to see Shaw back with occasional flashbacks to him as a young officer and see the creation of that personality. That would be legitimately interesting to me.
Yeah, I think we saw a tidbit of it when he went into his what formed him, like the Borg incident.
Yeah, his soliloquy,
the bar scene.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And I think that we need to see more of that as to why I'm not on your horse with you.
Yes.
Right.
I'm just trying to think of who else not to. He played. Todd played that character so well that on one hand, you just really wanted to like slap him upside the head. But on the flip side, you kind of wanted to say hallelujah. Again, just because I understand. I've been in the business end of things where the execs bring in a savior and it completely backfires. Can't tell you how many times I've been in positions where that's happened. But like you said before, I mean, it doesn't make me like the Grand Captains any less. I mean,
Right.
all of them broke the rules. I mean, I love them. That's what made the TV shows.
That's one of the things where Star Trek stands out, that for the most part, the captains, the major characters are not monolithic.
No. Yeah.
Well, what do you
Just
mean
give
by
it
that?
to
What do
me.
you mean by that?
Well, I mean the like not enough of them, but like the major characters, right? The captains, some of the officers who get a lot of screen time, right? Over the series, over the years, their characters really get developed. They're not all of them, but with some of them, there's true complexity.
Well, I would say captains, they aren't, but I don't necessarily,
Not all of them, but certainly some of them.
You have me thinking hard on this one because
well, the
I
Grand
think
Captains, I would agree. I mean, I can't think of like Kirk,
Well, okay, like Archer
Janeway.
didn't have a lot of depth.
okay, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going here. So I'm sorry. My favorite episode with Archer,
Yeah.
and it's made him look like crud, is when he stole the warp drive from the Illyrians. Season 3, right? So
I couldn't get past season 2.
Okay,
I just couldn't.
It's season 3 where it wakes up. I tell everyone watches season 3.
Yeah.
He was in a time of war and made really bad decisions.
Yeah.
And because of that, I love him. Because
Yeah.
then he's working with that for the next 2
Okay.
seasons. And I think, again, the fault as a character, not as an actress, Michael Burnham is we're seeing a Mary Sue every week. She forces herself onto away missions where Picard would have sent Riker, where Voyager where Janeway would have sent Chakotay. She forces herself into every scene and is smartest and figuring out the riddles and jumping on a warp, moving at warp.
I know. I'm with you.
Tiresome.
100%.
It's not. We watch Star Trek for the personalities, not just for one character. And if it is going to be one character, call it what it is, Picard. Name it Burnham. They should call it Star Trek Burnham. And then we would have all been like, okay, every week it's going to be about Burnham. But they misnamed it and called it Discovery. So monolithic, going back to monolithic characters, I do think Star Trek has Hollywooded it out so that the captains, no matter what they do wrong, they get away with it. I think it's kind of a Hollywood writing style.
Yeah.
Right? Did they? We're rabbit holing all over the place, but you bring up Burnham. Do you think that was the intention? Because Burnham wasn't the captain to start. Obviously, it was Lorca in season 1. She was a
prisoner.
A prisoner. She was a mutineer. Do you think that was the original intent in season 1 of Discovery?
I bet we would learn more about the Michael Burnham character by reading Sonequa Martin Green's employment contract than reading the scripts from the writers.
Interesting. I will say there are clearly some brilliant writers in that writing room, and the actors are incredible. Most of the actors are just so competent. I mean, it just beautiful acting. That said, like I love what they're doing with Culber. It's like, why were you not doing this in season 1? But that said, and I know this is contentious, but you started it, so I'm blaming you, Michael.
I'm not saying I didn't say anything negative about the actors. I just want to say.
Oh no, not about the actors at all.
Right.
My God, it is such a strong cast. I mean, it's incredible. But in terms of what they do with the characters and what they do with the stories, I mean, I'm grateful that Discovery came and brought back our new golden age of Star Trek. I'm immensely grateful. But the stories never landed.
How would Shaw feel about Captain Burnham?
Oh, out the airlock in the first few minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Seven would probably try to kill her.
Well, and let me tell you, Discovery did something 3 seasons too late that could have got it to 7 seasons. They introduced Raynor in season 5 because he speaks to the Star Trek grognards, those of us who've been around a long time, and they should have introduced a dissenting opinion, even if they were going to let Michael Burnham be the Mary Sue. We should have had him in season 3 to voice how we feel so that we feel validated watching the show. Like there should have been him calling out like, you cry a little too much for a captain. Even just saying that.
Don't even get me started.
No, even just saying that, even if she was going to retain that under the auspices of her director, which is why she does it. Her director directs her like that. At least letting grognards have a voice like, yeah, Raynor, we love you. We would have watched a show for Raynor, but we would have watched Discovery.
Well, first of all, Star Trek grognards, well done. You heard it here first. Second, in terms of Raynor, it's, I mean, obviously wonderful character. I agree with you 100%. And yet, no one grows that quickly, human or not, right? A 2 to 3 episode arc of softening and getting in line.
I know.
Right. I think we're in wide agreement. Okay, I want to pivot a little bit here because I'm very curious. I want to bring us back a bit. Workflow, making the literary conceptual sausage, if you will. So you wrote this beautiful story. How do we know? Because it was published in Star Trek Explorer, right? You've got all these people reading it now. But what was the workflow? Like Michael, what was the timeline? Because Brad and I are always curious about this with writing and design. Like how early did you pitch it? How long were you writing? How far back was this idea germinating?
So when I found out I was going to be able to put the pitch in, within a week I heard back, and I was given like 5 weeks to do it.
Okay.
Wow. So I always have I have this in my mind, scenes I wish I could see, and that's based off of the Delta Flyers, Bobby Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wong. If you subscribe to their podcast, they have something like they go through every show and then they always ask like, what scene would we wish we would have seen?
Nice. Yeah.
And so I've started mentally doing that when I watch shows. So I knew I wanted to know more about the moment Picard season 1, the doors open and Seven was on the other side and she said, "Call me Commander Hansen." My thing was like, what was that conversation like? That was my question that created the article.
Nice.
My writing process then goes into this. When I write, the first thing I do is I write like puzzle pieces, the scenes I want to see, what I want to hear people saying, the conflict I want to hit. I don't care if it's some way I wrote up an amazing explosion and bodies going over railings or an insult that I want one character to hand over to another. All I do is like, here's my pieces of what I want to hear. Like the Osanji, in case you're wondering how to pronounce it, the aliens in there, the Osanji. I had yeah. Oh, did you know it was Osanji? Oh, good.
I assumed. Okay, sweet.
Very nice. Makes me happy. Okay, so I had wrote like, what does this alien creatures look like, and what are they like as pirates? Like, what would be some really cool pirates? And so I'm not going to tell. You can read the story to find out what their cool trick is. But I take these puzzle pieces, and then once I have the puzzle pieces mastered, kind of like, oh God, that was funny. Oh, that was a good insult. Oh, that was really good. Then what I do is then I go ahead and write around it. So I fill in the gaps with it. So in this case, I probably had about, because it's a short, it was only 2,500 words. So I only had about three puzzle pieces of things that had to hit hard.
Yeah.
And then I worked around that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I always write the scenes I want to see first. And I would suggest that for a screenplay or a novel, don't worry about writing it in order. Just write the scenes you want to see first.
Can I ask something? This is like more tactical, mundane type of stuff. When you sit down to write, what's the environment you sit down to write in? Is it, and are you pen to paper? Are you finger to keyboard? When you're starting to conceptualize, do you do any sort of outlining or mind mapping beforehand, or do you just start mapping out your scenes or whatever you're talking about? Oh, you can't see it, folks, but he's looking around. He's going to visualize.
He's got us curious now.
Yeah.
No. So I'll show you an example.
He picks up his writing puppy.
I do. And
I'm always fascinated for the folks for those of you who are creative like this, as to how you do it. Because
so it's evolved over the years. So originally, when I started writing, I jot down bullet points of things I need to have happen, conflict points or inciting incident. But then I move it onto post-it cards.
Actually,
index cards. And so I write these index cards. So there's numbers up in the corner, kind of for like the order of events.
Look at that.
And so I'll do these index cards just noting it around. And this comes from this practice I got from a book called Save the Cat. And it's about how to write screenplays. And his exercise is you should be able to do any Hollywood screenplay using just 40 index cards, each card being one scene. In order to get to the 100-page standard screenplay. So then I'll take these and I'll lay them out on a table. And then as an exercise, like for instance, with my wife, when I was doing a story, I ask her to look for the gaps and what doesn't make sense. So she's a great critical thinker, and she's the kind who watches Star Trek with me and goes like, well, that doesn't make sense. Didn't 3 episodes ago they say that does that? So I love having that, right? So I lay it out, and then we look for the gaps, and then I go back and rework the story.
Sorry, Michael, you lost us at wife who watches Star Trek, but keep going.
Yeah. And she does it through osmosis too. She pretends she's doing something else, but she's actually paying attention. She's really brilliant.
That's great.
Yeah, and she comes up with a weird, like she knows more about Marvel and Star Trek than anyone who claims not to be a fan, right?
Oh, funny.
So anyways, then I map it out like that, and I look for gaps. So I tell this. In fact, I was just telling someone today, people write and edit, and then they never get anything done because they're too busy editing themselves to get to the finished piece. I don't do that. I write everything out, lay it out, and then I look for conflicts as I go through, and I fix the conflicts. And then I go into editing mode at that point. But I write crap at first. I really do what I consider. I write crap at first, and I let it go. And then I go back and fix it through that process. So that's kind of the thing. So even if you don't have the index cards, bullet point, do your most visceral scenes, get those, figure out what the rhythm. So basically I go 1, 2 visceral, 1, 2 visceral, 1, 2 visceral, however that looks. And I get to the end of the story that way. I hope that's clear.
No. This is actually
really interesting,
because everyone has their own recipe to get to the end. And some people have I always go back to George R.R. Martin, where he uses an old disconnected IBM computer, and he still uses WordStar 2000 to write his novels because of all the different, because all the names are so unique. He didn't want a spell checker.
Yeah, I can see that.
Him,
Yeah, and without even talking about the zone, there's something else that's important to do too, is when you write the puzzle pieces that you're excited about, those scenes, then when you're starting to bridge them together, you're excited because you're like, oh, I can't wait to get to this scene. That's how I feel, at least.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I got to build up to the scene. I got to build up. And what you don't do is you don't write too much where it's like crap incident. You really want to get people constantly thinking as they turn the pages. You really want to design your book in a way that every page they turn is a cliffhanger. Heather Antos from IDW Publishing, she said the advice she gives her comic writers is that, when you have the 2-page fold and it's down there, is by the time you get to the right-hand page, that final panel, it should be some sort of cliffhanger to make people want to turn the page. Right. And she instructs her comic writers to do that, so they unknowingly, they're always like, oh. So I kind of try understanding that I don't know how the final print will look on a novel. I really try to write those so that people want to keep going and pushing through the story.
I'm curious, professionally for work, right? Your day job, you also have to do a fair bit of writing, correct?
A lot,
right.
So talking points for executives, instructional design for classes, and one of the things I do teach is storytelling too. I mentor people on storytelling, including on how to tell their own story, like in a resume or during an interview. And I use the same analogy that everyone has a story. First of all, there's no one who's boring in the whole planet. You find me anybody, I will find inciting incidents in their life, right? And you have this target. I'm going to do this hand for this. Oh, no one's looking. So picture a target. I'm sorry, I forget we're a podcast.
Yeah.
So picture a target at the top of a hill.
Yeah.
That you're trying to hit, but there's 3 brick walls between you and getting to that target, that goal. So I tell people, when you tell your life story, what's your goal in life? And they say, well, I want to be the vice president of this company. Okay, tell me what the 3 brick walls are to you getting there.
Interesting.
And then they're like, well, I don't have the education. Oh, yeah, that's intense. So how are you going to find the funding for education and stuff like that? And then what's the next one? Oh, okay, well, I'm a person of color and I don't think I can compete in the corporate environment. Oh, that's a good one. Let's tell a story about that. And what's the last one? Well, on the interview, I'm going to be totally freaking out because I suck at interviews. Oh, that's great tension. So they have an amazing story about how they became a vice president.
Yeah.
And everybody has that in life. So that's another one of my tricks when writing stories.
Yeah.
I go for the goal, but then I create 3 brick walls that are going to bar people from achieving that goal.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, okay, Brad, go ahead. You're going to say something.
No, I'm just soaking that in because that's a fascinating, because we've talked about, everyone has a story. You could look at anyone should look at especially if you're from a professional arena, if you feel like you're getting down on yourself, look at your own story as a hero's journey. So just hearing you tell the story is, the 3, I'm using my hands now as the 3 brick walls.
I like that.
It can also be an exercise for yourself to remind yourself of your worth and your value.
Everyone has it. Everyone has a great story. None of us get here to where we're at without strain and tribulation, right?
That's right. Tension. We fall into mud pits. Nobody, I can't think, nobody's life has been easy.
Right. Well, somebody out there right now is listening to this and saying, well, yeah, there's some people with privilege. You're right. But do you understand that privilege is creating brick walls for your ultimate goal, which is probably to be happy?
That's right.
Yeah. So there's stories in even the privilege that you don't even realize you got brick walls. You will face them before you fall.
Yes.
And that is an amazing story to watch.
And I haven't met anyone who feels like they haven't fallen that won't fall tomorrow or the next day.
That's right.
Like that.
Beware he who thinks he is standing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so a question then, looking forward, within the bounds of opprobrium. Obviously, you just don't tell us anything you don't want to tell us. Now Michael's worried. Excellent. So
just hand gesture it as you're telling us the lines.
Yeah,
I know sign language, down. So don't ask. I could say maybe the NDA said I couldn't say anything, but I can still use sign language.
I'll bring my wife down. It'll be fine. So what's next? Either things you are planning to work on, or if you can't talk about that, maybe things you would just love to work on someday, near or far.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can talk about some stuff I pitched. I can't talk about what I'm working on right now.
Of course.
Of course, there's always Modifius, and I hope they maintain the Star Trek Adventures line. You're all aware that by now 2E has been announced. The starter set.
I can't tell you how quickly I pre-ordered that.
Okay.
And I cannot tell you how quickly Jason almost cried in his pillow when he realized that the attached PDF that came with the pre-order was only a placeholder PDF and not the actual.
Well played, sirs. Well played.
Yeah, that was.
I will tell you, the design on the book is amazing. So, there's a lot of controversy about second edition as if this is Dungeons and Dragons. Of course, it's not. It's Star Trek. It's better than Dungeons and Dragons. So we do everything with class and finesse. We're upgrading technology. We're not dragging stuff back.
Says the guy with the paper note cards. But go on.
Right. Hey, it's a thought exercise. Even what's his name on?
That's awesome.
On Discovery, he uses a yellow notepad. I love that. Well,
I enjoyed that. Yes.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that. Sorry. So okay. So yeah, what's coming up? What are your thoughts?
So 2E, when it fully drops, which is, I don't know when this show is airing, but when it fully drops, hopefully by Gen Con,
right?
In August, I think people who adopt it are going to really like it. I'm really excited about that, and there's some really exciting support supplements that are coming out that people have been begging for. So look forward to that.
And Michael, I'm sorry, Matt, you've had a hand in 2E, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, okay, I thought so, but I mean, I want to be respectful.
And I would recommend to folks, go out to the Modifius Discord. There's a lot of conversation going on, a lot of good conversation. There's a lot of good conversation going out on Reddit about it.
Nathan Dowdell's blog posts have been truly illuminating and honestly really exciting.
And as much as we talk to you both, we don't have any inside info. What I'll say to you is what I just said. What I can say is only by my own reading. It's going to be very easy to transition. If you want to stand first, go for it. If you want to transition and go a 1 to a 1.5 to a 2, you can do that. The way that this looks like it's going to work for those of us as end users, there's my tech term, it's going to be very smooth. This is not going to be like other games out there where you feel like it has to be a forklift upgrade, or you're going to have to send all your books to half price books and buy something new. It's
No,
just not going to
exactly.
operate
Yeah.
that way.
Right. And let me tell
So,
you, for those of you who are worried about it, I had to play a lead writer on Captain's Log, the solo RPG. I had to
Yeah.
play test 2E and help with some of the mechanics and stuff. I'm the type, when it comes to changing the games I love, I dislike it till I like it. Meaning I go at it ferociously until
Mhm.
I am willing to buy it.
Mhm.
mhm.
Captain's Log was the same thing. I was a disbeliever at first, and I was the lead writer. And I said, I have to work this until I actually enjoy it. And now I love it. So
Yeah.
people need to have confidence that the people working on the game are playing the game and we're coming at it hard.
I
So
think
we're not
it's
going to give you anything that's going to make your life
No.
more complicated.
I mean, of course, we also, right, our inside track on this is we know a few of you guys, and we know like firsthand how passionately and seriously you take that responsibility. I think it looks
Mhm.
amazing, and I'm not asking, and honestly, you guys just the whole team, you keep surprising me. I think both of us, but okay, like Captain's Log, like where did that come from? I mean, it's just one of the best things ever. And so I have no idea what the supplements are going to be. And honestly, and this is very unlike me, but I'm just not even going to try to figure it out because I know I'll be wrong. I just know it's going to be awesome. Like that
We try to
you guys really
please.
bat
Yeah.
100.
Jason and I have
Yeah.
had, I will tell you this, I don't think we've mentioned even at the gym before. We've had in the past, like we use Apple Notes as our little shared notepad for things.
Mhm.
In the past, we've had a little Apple Note where we've had our little conjecture as to what's going to come out. We got rid of it because we've been like,
We were wrong every time.
we were
So that's the
wrong every
glory of
time.
it. Yeah.
So
Awesome. Yeah.
now we just we
Interesting.
It's
go
so
along and we
cool.
have other stuff going. And when we get an announcement, like when 2E comes out, we don't get any pre-warning. The only time we got a pre-warning was, I think, just a couple days before was with Captain's Log, but that was as part
Oh,
of the press
right. I
press,
will
right?
say though, sorry, and then because I want to hear more about the Michael stuff, not just the 2E stuff, but something
Yeah.
that I read into deeply. Well, there wasn't much said, but that really stood out in one of Nathan Dowdell's blog. I don't remember which one. I have to check to see if there are any updates. But it stuck out because, like, I've heard you guys talking on continuing conversations, and like Jim has said this to me when we've chatted offline. Um, the comment in the blog post, this really made me happy that the line now has access, quote unquote, I don't remember how we phrased it, to canon, right? To all of the shows. I'm not asking, but just
Yeah,
that
no,
it
we've been very open.
okay.
We have the license to Prodigy. I should say, I'm a freelancer. They have the license to
Yeah.
Prodigy and Strange New Worlds. Uh-huh.
But I know that's sometimes difficult, and I mean it's they're this, I mean it's CBS, they're Paramount Plus, it's Paramount, that's huge, but I also know, like, in talking over the years now with Jim, like how eager he was, how hopeful he was to get some of the licenses, and so just to see that really subtle, and since we have blah blah blah, we can, and then no mention of it, like in that I thought, well, that's outstanding.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many times we get kicked back stuff because it's like, oh, we didn't have the license for that, or we didn't have a license for that. And then
right.
once we do, it opens up a new avenue
So
of
cool.
writing because you know these shows like Prodigy have opened it up for kids, and
Yeah,
I think I dream I talk about this on my show all the time, so this is not NDA. I
yeah.
constantly say I would love if Prodigy was used as the basis for Star Trek Adventures for Kids. That it was,
Yeah.
Dr. Erin McDonald came on our show, if you remember. She's been on your
Yep.
show too.
Yeah, she's
And
great.
and
Yeah.
she talked about the structure of Prodigy, that it teaches a Star Trek trope each episode. And I
Right.
think you could actually teach people to play the game in the same way. And
Yes.
so those are the kind of things we're pushing for
Yeah,
to
that's
make
so
the
cool.
game more accessible.
Yeah.
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 I have
Not
two,
in a
Michael. I've
pandering Lego sort of way. Oops, sorry, I said that out loud.
Oh God. I have two Michael questions.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
that we're
because
wrapping
we
up, but
still need the answer about like what he'd like to do in the future and like what
yeah,
drives him.
yeah. But I have two questions, but I want to go back to that first
Okay.
before.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So what's weird is I'm so happy with what I've been able to do that it was unexpected. It's hard for me to be like, oh, I want to do this and this and this and this, because
Yeah.
I honestly never thought I'd be able to write anything for Star Trek IP that's published, right? I just didn't. It's just I didn't think about it, right? If anything, I would have thought I'd be doing it for Marvel because I grew up on Marvel. But So I definitely want to pitch more nonfiction stories. I know I'm pitching a lot of those. I am. I've talked about this on our show. I would love if Star Trek Explorer magazine had 1 or 2 pages dedicated to Star Trek gaming every
Oh,
issue.
that'd be awesome.
And so
Yes.
I've talked to the publishers about that. I'm like, and I know people who could write it, you know, and maybe in there, maybe not if we need to fill space, we also add like a new mission brief, and
Right.
it just add stuff just so that you get more people into Star Trek Explorer magazine.
Yeah.
I find Star Trek Explorer magazine equal to Memory Alpha when it comes to, and it's even better than Memory Alpha because CBS has their eyes on whatever they're putting in there. And so I use that for a basis of writing too. Sometimes like, ooh, I didn't know that little detail about the 10 time travel things. Oh, and I can use that in my writing because I don't have to fact check it. I know it's for sure good.
Right.
Memory Alpha, you still have to fact check and watch the episodes before you put something out there.
Of course.
So that is definitely one. I also wish to be the next Derek Tyler Attico. I would love to write a Star Trek novel. I mean, that would really be, to me, I keep saying that writing the game was my final goal. I'm done. And then, I got to do nonfiction. I'm done. But novel to me is like, I'm done. Like, that would be so cool to write a novel. Cool. Personal projects, what's weird is because my day job has me writing so much. I've been hitting a wall lately that I do so much creatively for my company. And the time I spend there, I'm having trouble doing my own creative project. I have ideas.
Yeah, that's fair.
But of course, I'm going to do for the paying stuff before I ever get to my own stuff.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
I don't know where it's going to end up. So maybe one day, if that dries up, I'll get to some of my personal novels that I would like to write. Whether I get paid for them or not wouldn't really make a difference. It's just having the time to publish.
Are you doing anything these days with solo captain's logging or anything like that you want to talk about, or is it just it's kind of shelved because of you just kind of maybe alluded to it now, just because you're with everything creative you're doing, you don't have a lot
the 19 other projects.
So yeah,
when it comes to Captain's Log, I'm gonna go NDA on that one.
You know what? Okay. That makes us happy enough.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't mean to jump the border. I jumped the.
No, but that's good because I'm glad to hear that maybe NDA Captain's Log isn't gonna, no pun intended, isn't gonna be a solo endeavor. It's such an amazing product. We've hoped that there would eventually be more.
And there's something that I've been playing around with too. I will tell you something I want to do, but I don't know if I have time or energy to continue because I'm already shooting the podcast every year for continuing conversations. But I could start at any moment. I have the support and the graphic support and the backing. People want to see a live stream solo RPG weekly. I have a name for the show. Can I really do it weekly? And I want it to be live so that as I play the game, I'm asking people to contribute ideas, roles, names for characters as they get generated. Very coffee. I would love to be like a Saturday morning coffee chat, like wake up and get your RPG weekend started by having coffee with me while I play Captain's Log, and kind of inspired by Eric Campbell. How he does his game and a lot of the people who do it. I have a name for it called Confined to Quarters, because you're by yourself. And I just think, come join me in my quarters. I'm confined to quarters. I got a solo RPG. And so I literally could turn this on to start next month. I could start doing it.
You're really bumping up against a van on the street vibe there, but I don't think that's where you're going.
But yeah, it's
there's no free candy on the door to his quarters. Okay,
that would be really cool. What would that take in terms of? Because I know I'm like we're audio, right? Like we know enough to do this. What would that take in terms of production? Like how intense would that be?
I've already got that set up. So if I did it, it would be live stream through Twitch and TikTok.
Yeah. Okay.
And we had to have a secondary to TikTok because we don't know where TikTok's going to be next month or next year. So it would be something where people can listen to it, but also there would be visuals, as I do roll tables, and people could, and I would be watching the chat so that I could interact with people. And I was inspired by Me, Myself, and Die. Have you heard of that? Yes. Oh my god, Trevor Duvall. Trevor Duvall. Go look him up on YouTube. Me, Myself, and Die. He's my hero. I met him and hung out with him at Gen Con. He, during the pandemic, started Me, Myself, and Die, D-I-E, by the way. he did 5 Parsecs from Home, which is a cool solo RPG with
Yep.
minis. He is the
Mhm.
most exciting person to watch. If you don't know who he is, he does the voicing for Emperor Palpatine on Lego Star Wars, Rocket Raccoon on the cartoon.
Oh,
He's a Disney,
funny.
yeah, he's a Disney actor. Um, I love the guy. His energy is where I want to be. And so that's who I really would model myself after if I was doing a solo RPG. So that is something I'd like to do. I just don't know if I have the time and commitment to make
Yeah,
it a
yeah,
weekly thing. And if you're not consistent, you're not going to get viewership.
But his
yeah.
show is I didn't catch it until I want to say about a year and a half ago. And
Mm.
I did go back and watch the back episodes because I was fascinated because I found 5 Parsecs from Home and I wanted to watch.
Mm.
His was the first that came up. So
Yeah, my wife had to stop me from turning one of our rooms into a 5 Parsecs from Home battleground because I was so inspired by it during the pandemic. I was like, oh, I should do that downstairs. She's like, do you really want to do that commitment? Really?
okay, so that was one question. Two more from me. Reading wise, we've been talking a lot about reading
Mm.
or writing from a reading perspective, because Jason and I, we go over to our little Autobahn court and we talk about what's
Mhm.
on our desk. What have you had time to do any reading, and what have you been reading lately,
Yeah,
if anything?
I'm
Yeah.
usually reading 4 different books at a time. What I
Yeah.
do is I have 4 different devices or 4 different locations I'm at. And so like at the gym, I have a book and I have an audio book while I'm driving, or I have one while I'm at home in hard copy. And I also have one on electronic copy. So I'm constantly switching. I will read 4 different books at a time. And I kind of think of it like episodes on a TV show. You don't have to wait to finish Frasier to go watch Cheers, to go watch Golden Girls. You can actually, your brain can handle all 4 at a time. And so I do books the same way. So what I just went through were the 2 books from Octavia Butler. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Why did it take me so long to
Yeah,
read?
really, really late comer too. Really late.
Oh,
Yeah.
what I mean, talk about dystopian. Oh, is there a movie? I was like, is there a movie? I don't want to see the movie, actually. It'd be too gory for me. But Octavia Butler were 2 of the last books I read that will change how I write as a sci-fi writer from now on, for
Nice.
sure. Yeah, and that was recommended from Derek Tyler Attico because I read his book. I finished his book, the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, of course, which I'm going to go and read that a second time on my next vacation because it was so good.
Wow.
And then I'm also currently I'm going to actually look on my phone because I was just listening it today, and I listen to so many Star Trek books that I forget the titles of them. So Revenant, excellent. If you didn't read
Interesting.
Star Trek Revenant, it's a story about Dax. Oh,
I
Oh, I've
oh,
I
it's
think
heard
that
of
was
good.
part.
that.
I think that was one of the start. That was one of the like 99-cent books like
Mm-hmm.
within the past couple months that I haven't gotten to yet.
A
Yeah, and
Kindle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had it on Kindle. I don't know if you subscribe to Libby. Everyone should. Does everyone have a
Mm-mm.
Libby app here? So Libby is your local library
Yeah.
system.
Hmm.
And so you can go on to Libby. I subscribe to San Francisco and Berkeley because they have the big repository of books.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to the audio book right now of John Jackson Miller's Star Trek Discovery with Pike. It's before they got back from the Klingon War. Excellent.
Oh, I
Um,
read that one.
yeah, that's really
That was
good.
good.
I'm midway through that. And of course, I just finished Firewall by David Mack too,
Hmm.
which is amazing. Um, yeah, I think those are the books I'm in right now. Yeah, that one. I read stuff on gardening all the time. I garden, so I have a book
Nice.
about cheap garden like tips and tricks, like workarounds, so you don't have to pay a lot for supplies. So I've been reading that.
I just
Yeah,
took
we
up
were
a side garden today. We're
Really?
yeah, it was we let it go. We're gonna build just a little stainless steel raised and back. Yeah.
I
Are you gonna put up your Walmart pool this year?
No. Pandemic's
Okay.
over, my friend.
okay. Two
Pandemic's
Okay.
over.
two things. Two things to say. First of all, I could do a podcast about vermiculture and Oya pots. I could do hour
I
episodes
don't
on
know
that.
the latter.
Okay, so vermiculture I'm big into. I have my own worm bins and I've been producing my own soil for since 2018, since I moved to this house. So I love vermiculture. So don't get me started on that. And then two, Oya pots. So Oya pots is a technology that's about 4,000 years old, very, very popular in China, very popular in Africa, and it's the clay pot. And so what you do is you get, a circular clay pot with a nozzle on it with an
Okay.
open end. You fill it with water and you put it in the soil because clay sweats. And so
Yes.
I've reduced my water bill about 70%, which is super
That's
important here in
awesome.
California.
Yep.
And I have these Oya pots all around my garden. And this is the first year where I went 100% Oya pot, and I've never had such a great crop of vegetables. It's amazing because the
Oh,
root
that's
systems
cool.
end up going around the clay
Around it.
pots. And in California, we can grow 10 months out of the year pretty
Right.
much.
Right.
12 if you really want to work a greenhouse. But I mean every day we're picking salad because we like fresh salad.
And
It's just amazing.
using these, you can grow through the summer.
Oh yeah, because they're sweating, and so every
Yeah.
day
Yeah.
instead of surface watering where you lose a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
evaporation,
Yeah.
I fill the Oya pot every day to measure, and it'll go down maybe about half in a very very hot day, which around here
Yeah.
is like
Okay.
80 to 90 degrees, right?
Yeah.
But if you're in a high humidity environment, I would imagine they sweat
Oh,
less.
right.
But it's amazing. I mean, and
Wow.
why this? Everyone should have Oya pots in their garden.
Well, now I'm thinking that would be great. The only problem we have up by us, Jace, is when we have the ground freeze. We just have to replace them every year.
Yeah, you got
Yeah.
well, take them out because they'll crack underground freeze.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because they're
Okay.
clay. So during the
Yeah.
freezing
But
season, you do need to take them out.
but this is cool. Thank you. Seriously, because I
Mhm.
could do this in the new raised garden. Put it right in the middle of that thing intentionally. That would be. I'm just really impressed because, like, I mean, like, I know your locale
Mhm.
really well. It gets hot and dry.
Yeah, we've had two amazingly nice rainy years,
Oh,
but it's
good.
not normal. But
Yeah.
like with the Oya
Yeah.
pot, it's spelled Olla for anyone who's wondering. It's Olla,
Okay.
Spanish pronunciation, Oya. But what I would do in your environment too
Yeah.
is when it does get a little chillier, if you have a small garden area, then you can go ahead and create your own greenhouse, right? Get some U-ring pipe
Oh,
and then
this is
cover it
true.
over, capture the heat, and you could still keep the Oya pot without it cracking. See, I could talk about geeky stuff all day. I could.
No, I
You,
could.
you are a man of many
Well,
talents.
the funny thing is we all three of us could probably talk about this for
Yeah.
hours. Just
I mean, no
I
one's
love
listening anymore,
gardening.
but yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah,
We'd be
yeah.
here.
We
But,
got we
but here's what's Star Trek about it. Here's what's
yeah.
Yes,
Star
there it
Trek
is.
about it. Think about it. On Star Trek, you have waste management systems where you
Yes.
have to do composting, and you need worms to do this effectively, or black soldier fly grubs. Either way, you're going to get it. Soldier fly grubs are better because you can actually eat them when they dry out for protein, get them back into the system.
Okay,
But my point being is this: I think I don't know how we always end up on the subject. Why we live in a society over the last 100 years where feeding ourselves, which is a basic human function like defecating, has
Yeah.
become something that is government controlled and where you can't feed yourself. And
Yes.
if you give me a plot of land and a south facing yard, I'm growing my own food anywhere on the planet.
Yeah.
It's one of the basic human functions. So I think it's very Star Trek to say food equitability
Yes.
and teaching
Yes.
people to use your garden. It becomes a very addictive thing. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, if Safeway crashes, I might not starve to death. That's a pretty good premise.
We did the soil creation and everything with worms when I was growing up. I grew up.
Did you really?
If you look at Wisconsin and you look in the southeast corner of Milwaukee, I lived, far west of it where it was country, and we had that. And I remember picking monarch caterpillars out of the garden and putting them over in the
Nice.
milkweeds so that
Yeah.
and
Smart.
just I did I stopped doing that when I met Jason, went to college and then moved to the city. But just hearing
It's my
that kind of
fault.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last
It's
question
science.
for me.
It's science. It's wonderful, wonderful
Yes.
science.
Yeah. One.
It is.
Before the last question, just to sorry,
Yeah.
just
Just
Star
my last
Trek.
question.
Yeah. No. Well, no. And it's a great place to close. But like this, I mean, I think you're right, Michael. Like, oh God, 100% everything you're saying so deeply and personally. But this is one of the quote unquote promises of Star Trek, right? Using Alex Steffens's definition, this Star Trek looks toward a bright green future,
Mhm.
right? Where nature and technology and humanity are integrated at a much more deeper, no pun intended, organic, but technologically organic level. And some of the shows have drifted away, and some of them haven't. And it's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
Well, I mean, nature, no matter what people say, when you get down to it from a scientific standpoint, nature is technology.
Yep.
These are machines, micro machines working, and you can build better machines if you study how nature does it. So I don't see a difference between nature and technology.
I was listening to an interview with the author of The Light Eaters earlier today on a podcast. This is a science journalist who went around the country, around the world, interviewing scientists on the notion of plant agency or consciousness. Um, really interesting. We're drifting. Brad, your question.
You just made Michael and I just almost fell, or at least I almost fell asleep.
No, I'm
Okay.
like, I gotta listen to this. I'm a geek for stuff like that, so that's cool.
So, because I know you have it. I know you have it somewhere. It may not be in front of you, but I know it's out there. When are you going to crack open that limited edition Dune core rulebook?
Oh, hilarious.
And when are we going to get a
Did not see
game
that
going?
con.
So, with everything else going on, I know it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next month.
But come on,
just
the
keep
spice
it,
must flow.
keep it floating out there in the ether.
The thing is, I love the book so much, and I love the construct of the game so much. I am fully convinced I'm going to need to do like a 2 to 3 day weekend getaway to even play it effectively the first time. It's not, you can't sit around for 2 to 3 hours and get the full flavor of it. I've spent myself solo playing it for like 10, 12 hours maybe, and I'm addicted to it. And what I've decided to do is to adapt it for Klingon houses in my Star Trek game. So I'm using the rule system for Dune to represent the Klingon Empire.
Oh, that's interesting.
With a seat on the council being equal to controlling Arrakis.
Oh,
Brad's having a full-out nerdgasm.
I think I literally, I think a vein just popped. I got the latest, just the latest campaign.
That's interesting.
Federation Klingon War.
Mm-hmm. No, the Dune one. That one.
Oh, Dune. Okay,
yeah.
Also that, yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think a vein just popped thinking about that.
Yeah.
Well, Klingon houses are Dune. They each have their own industry, and we don't see that side of it. Like,
that's so interesting.
Right. Yeah. Now the Landsrad is the house.
Right. So my Landsrad, my major house
look at it like that.
My major house could be breeding targs. However, my minor house could be building targ pens, and another minor house or nascent house could be the one making the buttons for the targ pens. And so I think you can break it down to that level, Dune, because to me, a Klingon's only good with their house's story. So I want my character, when I do my character creation process, I want to build decades of what my house has been good at, whether we lost our house, major status, minor status. So by the time I introduce my character, I have all of this Landsrad behind me to create my value systems and what I'm fighting for and what I'm trying to represent and move my house forward.
Son of a bitch.
Mind blown. But Michael, glory on your house. Seriously.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh.
This, okay. We're going to just call it here because we're going to call it here. This is so good. Promise you'll come back.
Yeah, let's talk about the houses. Let's find a time and build our houses and just come back and talk about the houses we built.
Yes.
Oh, this is the first time I've ever
Dune
wanted
rules.
to play. Oh my God.
Glory to you.
I'm glad this is an audio only podcast.
That was my creepy attempt
really
to go
closely.
around. That didn't work.
Yeah. Well, I thought it worked quite well.
Okay.
Michael, it's so good to see you. It's so good to have you back.
So fun. I have the most fun with both of you, having conversations that go everywhere.
Right back at you.
Thank you again, Michael. It's there's a bit of, and I say this not facetiously and not in a negative way. I think we have a mutual admiration society going between us because we hold you and Jim both in high regard, and the fact that you mentioned that some of the stuff you both are doing and continuing conversations are based off of what you've heard with us from our show. You could not flatter us greater, and in many ways we have done the same thing with you all. And again, we know you'll be back again. And I know there are things that we're all working on where we're going to be crossing paths. So, even outside of the podcast world.
Yes.
So,
yes.
As we head over to Audubon Court, mine's a little, I think I've mentioned this before. We're in this little weird period where I'm in an RPG lull. We did talk a bit about Dune with Michael. Although he kind of threw me a curveball, so now I kind of have it on my plate to look at how he's doing some Dune and Trek um, uh, mechanics integrations, Dune RPG, Trek integrations. I don't know what, Jason, you're looking and you're typing. I don't know if you're planning something
I'm
or
paying total attention. Go
no,
on.
I don't care if you are or not. I'm just worried about what you're doing. Um, from my perspective, it has been um I have not. I think I've mentioned this for a couple of weeks. I have not done a whole lot on the gaming front. You and I just talked about the fact that
Yeah, we just talked about it.
we've been, you have been, um, you've been, driving the stagecoach, and we are at a point now where we are close to being set for probably a good 4 to 6 weeks, which would give us a window
Yep,
now to
that's right.
actually get back and do a bit of gaming.
That is the plan. Next week early.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I can, we've talked about this before. I know I have, as much as I would like to think I have more, I know I have limits. So um, I've had to put some artificial limits on what I allow in um,
Yeah.
my mind, and
Yep.
I've had to limit some things, but I can't think, for me, mostly because I know I've told you this, I've mentioned this before. I study music during the week. Um, for me, music's always been something we've talked about. Music has always even been parts of jokes that we've had. Um,
Yep.
so what's interesting is I still will put, this is a way off topic thing. So we'll see if this, sorry, Michael, if this kills the episode. Um, we come from the era of mixtapes,
Yes, indeed we do.
and we even come from the era of mix CDs. We
That came
probably are the
after.
we are probably the only generation that
Who
really
did
had mixed
both?
CDs. Who did
That
both?
is that is very true. I still have all of mine. My
Yes,
tapes and my CDs. The
yes.
mixes, yes.
And I know our cars don't have CD players anymore. My prior car, which is not my daughter's car, does. But I create, I don't know what they call it. I have my
You have
mix
a
lists.
playlist.
Playlist. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the term.
Yep. I have many
So
of those.
I do many lists, but I traditionally create one list. It's my annual list. So, and
Oh,
I have,
interesting.
and it's the one that tends to have a theme. And it tends to somewhat align with what I'm studying musically that year.
Okay. Okay.
And for me, you know, studying piano, organ, horn, trumpet growing up, um, there were certain types of music I listened to. And one of the things I didn't really gravitate to in the 90s was a lot of like the traditional, alternative type of stuff. If
Mm-hmm.
it didn't
Mm-hmm.
if it didn't have a lot of melody or guitar or things like that, it
Yep.
really wasn't that type of thing. But my music list, my playlist for 2024 is a lot of 90s stuff.
Nice.
And so I've been reading about on my bookshelf, been reading about music in the 90s
Oh, interesting.
and the music companies, not the music industry, not the music, I'm not that, but like musical instrument companies and how these companies
Oh, that's interesting.
navigated the advent of the internet age. And I'm roundabouting this. This is going to be an open-ended discussion, and I
Yeah.
was going to mention this to you outside of the podcast, but I'll leave it here as an open-ended topic. One of the largest music companies, music stores in the country is closing. Company Sam Ash Music is closing.
Okay.
Um, one of the biggest in the nation. 100 years in service,
Yeah.
45 some large stores.
Well,
And so there's this talk in the music world, is the era of the big box over? Well, we've heard this. How many times have we heard
yeah.
this in other
Yeah.
areas? And people are talking about how there can be a big box model. There's a company out there called Sweetwater. They have a model that seems to be working where they have a retail location and a very large online presence.
Okay.
Is their method going to work? Is Amazon's method going to work?
Yeah.
And why I bring that up is because it
Yeah.
plays into the idea of books.
Uh-huh.
Can a Barnes and Noble continue to exist with all the real estate that it carries?
Right.
Can regional book companies exist? Can we both know that smaller mom and pop book companies will always, I think, continue to exist as long as there is a need or interest in the printed word. We know
Yeah,
that there
yep,
are regionalized half price books out there,
yep, absolutely.
you know, but again, weird topic, but this would be the type of random topic we'd bring up while we were sitting at a bookstore.
This is true.
Um, so I leave that as kind of an open-ended thing. You know, playing music to looking at the music industry in the 90s to seeing how music stores from that became real hot in the 90s and 2000s are now starting to close, and seeing how the music industry is shifting. When we
Is
were
it
in,
is it going to follow suit of bookstores?
yes, are we
Yeah,
see,
I don't know.
I don't either, but it's almost like a futurist type of discussion. But I honestly think that it's funny listening to people in this realm that I'm reading now, in this musical realm, because you and I've had these topics of conversation in the book realm for a while. And
Yeah,
we've had these discussions with guests on this show related to books. And
yes.
now I'm seeing kind of a mirror discussion.
So it's interesting because I wasn't going to go here. I'm going to just completely change what I was going to chat about in Audubon
Yeah.
Court this evening. So I mean, as you know, so looking at you on my laptop, on my MacBook, as I look past the computer, on my desk down here in my office, my home office, I'm looking at my lovely Yamaha digital piano,
Oh, I was looking
right?
at that picture of you from high school next to the Apple logo.
Well, that's good too. But
Well,
behind
that's
me,
no, isn't that right? Is that
yeah, yeah, no, you're right. But behind you,
no, but I'm
behind the
looking
computer,
at you got the United Federation of Planets flag.
no,
Then
that's the UN.
oh, it's the UN flag.
Yeah,
Okay.
the UFP
Then
would
you
be
have
better.
what's that? Okay.
UFP, yeah.
But then to
Then I got a
your
bunch of photos and an Einstein thing, an apple,
oh,
and
that's Einstein. I thought that was
yeah,
you from high school.
yeah, well, yeah, and the jokes ensue. Right.
Okay.
Nicely done. That said, ignoring Brad.
It took a while for me to get you to actually accept that one. That's what I was trying to
Yeah,
get.
how many times have you had to say that to your wife? But moving on.
Ouch.
But behind the computer is my P115,
Mhm.
right? My basically not quite entry level digital piano with phenomenal sound. And it's really ironic you bring this up, and it's ironic that we're talking about it, in this most public of all fora. I've mentioned this to you. I don't know if we've talked about this. I have not I have not practiced in a long time. I mean, you and I have talked, used to talk about this a
We've
ton.
talked about
And
this, yeah.
and yeah, and we once in a while we bring up like music and practice and stuff like that on the podcast. Because we know a lot of our listeners are musical. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Right? Creative people tend to do different creative things, right?
Hmm.
More than one often. Um, I am neither. However, I do like playing a little bit of piano and like I look at it almost with the twinge of guilt or apprehension because I miss it. But I took lessons at the local, nonprofit conservatory and then stepped away from that and then after like 3 years and then under your guidance went to Cadenza, one of our wonderful, and this is the tie-in, one of our wonderful local music shops
Hmm.
here in St. Paul, Minnesota. And they and just got a first-rate jazz teacher who is probably wondering where I still am after all this time. Um, did that for about a year, not quite.
Hmm.
And so I'd have to check my notes, but my practice log, but I think I've played once or twice max in 6 months, maybe more. And slowly it's inching back, but like I haven't thought of this notion of where like can big boxes survive for music? What will music start instruments and whatnot start to go the way of books? Like my wife and my girl surprised me a number of years ago now by picking this up on sale at I think our closest Guitar Land,
Guitar
Guitar
Center, probably.
Guitar Center. Yeah. Thank you. We have one
Guitar
up in
Center is one of those very
right.
organizations where we're wondering about. Yeah.
Right. And so, kind of, so we're drifting all over here, but like, I mean, this is what you're talking about. Like, I don't know what will come of those. And I've never looked at music or instruments that way. Although, I've looked into the used piano market because it's so interesting. But that's, kind of like the half price of books, if you will, except that people will pay you to take their used piano.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you find the right, I mean, you could find some gorgeous uprights. You could find some gorgeous mini grands. I mean, there's
Yep, yep.
even for me being, a horn player. I mean, I could have a whole time. I won't. I'm not going to bore people with this, but I know that we have friends out there like Drew Nichols, who's a
Yeah,
drummer.
yep. He
And I'll
does
be
other
curious.
things too, but
Yeah,
he's
he
a
does other
drummer.
things too, and I'll have to message him on this and see what his thoughts
Yeah,
are.
because we still need an update from him on something else anyways.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And if I remember correctly, James Sutter is a bit of a musician,
Yep.
as I recall. So I'll have to message him about that too. And I know
Yeah.
we have some others.
But this is the
So
thing, though.
yeah.
Quite a few of our guests over the past few years, they're these highly creative, very
Oh yes.
successful people. They're also musicians, either avocationally or sometimes in the past, quite seriously. Emily Strand, right, who writes about Star Wars and Star Trek and co-hosts the Potterverse, all of this stuff, right? I mean, she was a paid musician, right?
Yes.
There are so many people. Okay, we're really drifting here, but
Have we
I'm glad we came
we did
around here
actually
though.
kind of meet someone who did some composing for Star Trek too.
Yes, Nami Melamed also occasionally composes. That's right. Good point.
Yes.
And
So
is brilliant. But
yeah.
this is well done, sir, because this is interesting because this is not where I had planned it all on going to close this episode. And I don't think you had either, but now look at
No.
where we are with looking just at the sheer breadth of creativity among so many of the creators, producers, the wrong word, the just the creative people we talk to who are in and around RPGs.
And I'll say this, if I do a lot of we both do our own share of podcast listening,
Yep, yep.
video watching and all that. I do a lot of watching on business stuff. Um, Not professional related. I do enough of that elsewhere. But I've been watching a lot of music related stuff just because I'm fascinated by home production.
Yeah, yeah,
And so if folks are interested, and you don't have to be, I'm not a professional musician. I'm not even a working musician. I am
yeah.
a home-based wannabe musician.
Yeah, but you're a really gifted musician. You just
I'm
don't do it as much as you did back in the day.
yeah, but I enjoy doing it. It is just
Yeah,
it's fun to do when time permits. But if anyone ever wants to talk about this stuff, it's just fascinating to see how quickly the industry is shifting. And any of us who are consumers of music, who have those playlists, whether they're
yeah,
through Apple Music,
yes.
Spotify, this
Amazon,
affects
yeah.
this affects them
Hmm.
because this is
Hmm.
where, you know, um, if you're going to pick up, um, I can't even think of,
I was
well, I'm
waiting
not
for you
gonna.
to say if you're gonna go and pick up a CD at your Sam Goody, and it's like that might have passed, Fred.
No. I think we're
Okay,
past that point.
okay.
I was just gonna say, if you because no one picks up CDs, but if you're gonna go download the latest album from someone, um, think about the fact that they may be recording this on the equipment that you could technically buy yourself, and in many ways produce at home.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
whole industry is again,
it's
it's another industry
it's
that is
another industry that's
shifting.
fascinating,
Yep.
and there are parallels to with that can we can see some similarities with what we're seeing in the print industry.
All right. We wandered all the way back to where we started. Michael, dear friend of the podcast, thank you very much. We look forward to the next time you are on, which will be sooner, not later. In the meantime, everyone, our dear listeners, be well, stay well. We will see you next time.